it looked like absolute carnage. It looked like no one was in control of it. They were just wild times, but it was like, I think it was that wildness that drew me to it. Whereas in those early days, it was like the emergence of this like outlaw fight club. My first fight was on a show called Extreme Brawl, and my second fight was in a pub on a pier in Portsmouth, and it was still smoking indoors, and the smoke was gathered around shoulder height because of the low ceilings. And then I remember cornering people and getting hit with chairs, and it was just like people showing up to shows with guns. It was just a wild scene in the early days. I made my UFC debut against Akihiro Gono, who was way better than people knew. So I didn't get the credit for beating him, even though he was a real tough Japanese veteran. You know, and then the next guy was a massive puncher, but I knocked him out in just over a minute. So I didn't, like, that didn't really resonate too much. And I kind of knew that Marcus Davis, he was putting a lot of people away with big power, and I thought he would be a good target. But I also recognized he was very, very emotional. And he was very much invested in his Irish heritage. Even though he was born in the US, and you know, he was the Irish hand grenade, and you know, like everything about him was, he wore a kilt, and like, I mean, he went all the way down that route of like linking himself to Ireland. I just started to poke fun at that a little bit because I knew it would upset him. Not that I cared, I don't care, he can say wherever he wants he's from, but I knew that if I would start to poke at that, it would upset him and I would get a rise out of him, and I did. And he hated me, still hates me. And I needed to get him into that state, because what I didn't want to be dealing with was when he was a confident, loose southpaw boxer. And when he was confident he was going to knock somebody out, he would come in looking very, very different. But if he was coming in against a good striker who was confident, he would grapple with them. And I wanted to force him into that mindset. So I picked on him and I teased him. And I mean, it couldn't have worked any better, really. I'd laid the foundations in the weeks leading up to it by getting him in that mindset where he was going to be reckless and make bad decisions because I had controlled it.
Dan Hardy was enjoying getting Marcus Davis pissed off. Now the real question is Marcus Davis emotionally involved in the fight too much? Is he too worked up?
Like even between rounds, his coach was saying things like, "You're going to shut him up, Marcus." It was way more about the emotion involved in the fight than anything else. And I got him in such an emotional state that he was reckless.
Oh, he says he's good, but meanwhile he's having a hard time getting up. Winner by split decision, Dan Hardy, the winner by split decision.
So these are my teachers in China. There's Master Long, he was my Tai Chi and Qigong teacher, my Shaolin teacher, my Sanda teacher. Like, as you can see, I mean, it was like really like traditional countryside. This was the castle that we were staying in. This was the dining hall, northern China, Changchun, north of Changchun. And it was just like, there were old castle buildings that had been converted into, this was our courtyard, it's all our laundry hanging up. But like no glass in the windows, you know, rats everywhere, and that was the dining area. But it was like nothing was, it was not, it had not been like properly sanitized for Westerners, you know. See, we had a couple of punch bags, but it wasn't, I mean, they had sand in them for a start, so they bruise your shins. But yeah, I mean, the surrounding area was just, it was just farmland, there was nothing around. It was a great time. Really had a good time there. It was one of my friends. This was my room. You can see a lot of these weapons actually hanging up in the gym. They're on the wall in the gym. That's me and my friend Dan. He's another Brit that I met while I was out there. I look a lot different now. So that's me when I arrived. So I had quite a bit of hair. And then obviously all that came off pretty quickly. That was within a day. And then that's the new version of me. And they do not look like the same person.
Why?
And that was the new academy that they were building just before I left. So this opened a few weeks after I'd left.
Well, you got the authentic version.
Yeah. That was me and my little group. It's a good time though. It was a good time. It's me and my grandma. Tough lady, she could fight.
From nothing.
Yeah. St. Anne's.
Okay.
Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah.
makes sense.
I just spend lots and lots of time watching. Right, I spend lots of time watching, and I'm not just watching like staring at the screen and you kind of letting it, feel like I'm watching. I'm watching one fighter and I'm putting myself in that position. I'm watching the other fighter and I'm putting myself in that position. And I think that's one thing that helps me get so many repetitions without actually going through it myself, is because I can be the other person. I can be in that person's situation. I can imagine both sides of that fight from my own perspective. And this was entirely accidental. I would watch, as soon as I got a name, I would find whatever footage I could of this person. I'm gonna watch everything I can of this person, everything I can find, from their earliest fight in chronological order up to the most present day, the most recent thing I can get. And then I would go, okay, well, now I've watched that person, and I feel like I've absorbed a part of that person's soul, right? I feel like I have a good knowledge and awareness of how that person moves, how they think, and what they're most likely to do. Then I'll go back and watch my own fights from their perspective. And I'll go, right, well, I have these skills, so how are my skills going to fit into this game, which is now outside of myself? And from that, I would often be able to develop a game plan that would be the antithesis of what they were expecting. I just kind of scribble everywhere. Like when I'm in the gym, especially if I'm hitting the bag or something, I've got like the chalk markers, and I'll just put some combinations down. But I like to build them out so they flow on from one another. So double jab with the cross, jab hook with the cross. You know what I mean? So like I'll keep shifting through gears and stuff. But I like to write down quotes from people to just kind of stick in my mind, and things that will they'll prompt me to think a particular way. So like there's a lot of that kind of stuff as well. Like a lot behind the posters is just stuff I've scribbled or workouts or whatever. And then on that mirror over there next to the bag wall this is where I was trying to write down every single technique that can stand alone as a technique in combat sports. And I mean, I've scratched the surface here. There's a lot more to it, but like this is stuff that's accessible for me that I can just look at and go, right, let me work that portion, let me work that portion, let me take this portion and add this to it, and build different pieces out of it. He was an interesting challenge, GSP, because obviously he was the world champion and he was an established world champion, but I also knew that he had a lot of good people around him, right? Like he had John Danaher in his camp, who was a genius mind, still is now to this day, is a great mind of martial arts. So I didn't only feel like I was up against a team of people that were working together to dismantle me, and that felt that was a very unusual feeling to have, because I was in quite an unsettled place in my own camp, and I also knew, based on GSP's previous training camps and stuff, that they were going to do the whole psychological analysis on me and everything. Like they really go to town on it, much like I was doing with other people, but they were doing it as a team. But what I realized about GSP is that we're quite similar in a few ways. Like I can see that one of the things that drove him to be so good was anxiety, right? It was fear of being beaten up by someone that was better than him. And I knew that with my image and with a couple of the knockouts that I'd had in my career and stuff, I could instill that feeling in him that you just don't want to strike with me. It's just not worth rolling that dice, because I'm game and I enjoy the fight. Like that's why I was grinning when we were facing off, and that's why at the weigh-ins I'm like bouncing, like I can't wait to get my hands on you, bro. Like I can't wait to punch you in the face. And I wanted to just emit that feeling all the time.
The great George St. Pierre, one of the very best fighters in the world, takes on the young, up-and-coming, hungry Dan Hardy from the UK.
But also because GSP came out with the gi and was like, he's like the Karate Kid, you know what I mean? Like everyone, like all the fans loved him because he was like a proper traditional martial artist. I just wasn't in the fight. That was the most frustrating thing about it. But I also didn't get beaten up at all. You know, like I didn't take any damage. I got my arm twisted a little bit, but there was no damage from that. But like, there was a point during the training camp where I lost my grandfather, who was a big part of my martial arts journey. He like took me to train and trained with me for 5-6 years, you know. And so like losing him a few weeks before the fight was a real hit, because if ever I had like a day in training camp where I was like shaking a little bit confidence wise, I knew I could just go and sit with him. And he was so matter of fact, you know what I mean? It was like what they're gonna do, you know what I mean? It was always his energy, and I loved that impenetrable positivity that he always had around what I was capable of, and like and you know, the very kind of old school granddad thing. He's like, well, it's him that wants to be bloody nervous, you know, bloody like proper Nottingham accent. Well, you know, he needs to be nervous because he knows you're going to stove his bloody head in. You know, those kind of things, like old word, like stove his head in, and, you know, like proper old school granddad, you know. And he was just so matter of fact. And so I lost him, like I was with him when he died in the hospital. And I was like in and out of his room doing interviews for the fight. And like, so like losing him certainly connected me back to my traditional martial arts background. I'll be honest, I've never seen as many martial arts books in one place before. I always heard that Bruce Lee had a really good book collection of books, but obviously there are so many more books that exist now than when he existed. These gloves have actually punched Evander Holyfield in the face as well. They were used by a boxer called Michael Dokes in Vegas. They were gifted to me by my boxing coach. Used for one fight. There's no padding in them. The guy was a beast, an absolute beast. But yeah, I've just kind of got, like, this is my selection of books. I've got like a lot of Filipino stuff here. There's some samurai stuff, some Filipino stuff. It moves into Shaolin Kung Fu and all the different styles of Kung Fu, the animal styles, and a variety of different, I mean, Kung Fu is literally endless. There's so many different styles. A lot of old books here, old boxing books, a couple of old judo books and that. And then this is probably my favorite selection. These are all my Bruce Lee books. I've got everything he's written, and I've also got this is my first edition Tao of Jeet Kune Do. It's one of my prized possessions. So like when this book was released, it was groundbreaking, and I mean, just to have a first edition of it, I feel very fortunate to have. But my copy of it is this one, and this is the one where I make all my notes in. Because this is why, like, Bruce says this in it, like, there's space in the book, like you should be writing your own notes in it. And I always used to carry around one of these when I was a kid, and I filled it out. It was scribbled in, and then I lent it to someone. Never got it back. I can't even begin to imagine where it is now, but I would love it. So I started a new one a few years ago with updating all my notes and stuff, and there's just so much good information on these shelves. I feel very grateful to have it. And I keep adding new stuff as well. Like I just added these books when I was out in the US at the Strand, which is a fantastic bookshop at the Strand. They've got loads of like out of print and old books that you'd just never be able to get. Savat. People don't even know what Savat is these days. But yeah, it's just a really cool selection of books and just an endless amount of information I can always come back to. So like after I fought GSP, I went on a losing streak. I lost 4 fights in a row and I was kind of almost retired. I was, you know, if I'd have lost a 5th fight, I was going to go back to university was my plan. Like one of my last fights, probably my favorite knockout in my career was because of how controlled it was from the start to the finish. Duane Ludwig, one of my favorite fighters to watch. Great Muay Thai fighter that crossed over into MMA. He was credited for having the fastest knockout in the UFC, right? Jonathan Goulet came crashing across the octagon and Duane Ludwig just popped him on the chin, knocked him out cold with a short right hand. And the more I watched this, the more I realized how good he is at this right hand. How confident he is at just going from here, pop, without any wind up or any big power or anything. And I knew that would be something he'd be looking at landing because it's his go-to. It's his, as soon as someone steps forward aggressively, he's looking at tagging him with that right hand. But what I realized is that as soon as that right hand comes away from his chin, there's a gap here. As soon as the fight happened, I knew that right hand was in his arsenal and I walked onto it. Bam, stung me, my legs were gone. You can see it in the fight. I grab a hold of him and I run him to the fence. And I'm just holding him against the fence like while I'm trying to clear my head and get my legs back underneath me. And in hindsight, I can see that me getting tagged with that shot was a benefit because it reinforced his confidence in that punch. He's like, I've hit him with it once, I hurt him with it, I'll hit him with it again. I didn't intend on getting hit with the right hand, but because I did, it gave him the confidence to lean more into that technique. So a bit later in that round, as I'm moving around, I pump my lead hand as if I'm going to throw a jab, so he looks to counter it. And I see him throw that hand, I'm like, he's ready to go. And straight away off it, I throw the jab again as a feint. He pulls his right hand to counter and I come around the side to catch him. And I can see how that played out. It doesn't mean, but now I've seen how it played out, it means I can now replicate that in another scenario with complete control over it, right? I could take that right hand, knowing full well I'm taking that right hand and be ready to take it. I can even play possum a little bit like it's hurt me. You know, you can draw people into these traps all the time in martial arts, and that's a real high level of operating in mixed martial arts that was beyond me when I was competing, and I see it so occasionally now. But when I do see it, it's very, very special. Right, so the bag's here, so that's the middle point of the bag. And then that'd be the fence post. So you've got the pad on the post there, and then that's the corner post right there, and then you've got those 2 pads that come out, and they're your walls. That's your 135-degree angle, right? So say, for example, if I'm doing some bag work, and I'm standing in front of the bag here, I've got the person trapped in the corner. But this goes back to what we were saying a little earlier, by like I can manipulate the space between us to make them feel something. So if I'm standing here and I step to there, you know for sure they're going to move in that direction because they're not going to move here. There's no space, right? But I can have that same result just by going there.
Tied, yeah.
And it's so subtle that usually, as soon as someone subconsciously feels a little bit more space, they'll start to move. So if I'm going to throw a low kick, there's no point in me throwing a low kick here because they're not moving and I'm vulnerable. But if I step and then throw a low kick, most likely I'm going to hit them as they step onto it.
Right, okay.
And that works for so many different ranges. And
when you're there, if you're with an intelligent fighter and then they're giving you that 10, do you know? Can you feel it?
Well, this is where I have to hope that I'm empathic enough to know.
Can you still come around this way, even if they were trying to tighten you up a little?
I mean, I can, but if I feel like a trap is being set, then I can identify the dangers in the trap.
Yeah.
Right?
So much to it.
If I'm standing here and I can feel they're forcing me in this direction, I'm like, okay, well, again, assuming they're orthodox, they're going to try and hit me with a right hand, a right leg kick, or a right body kick, most likely, right? So if they force me in this direction, I've kind of got an idea of what I'm going to be dealing with.
Right, okay, yeah.
Right? So this is where the game within the game starts. Because if I feel like this person, they've got a great right hand, so they're going to try and squeeze me onto their right hand, I can use that right hand as food. So I can allow myself to be squeezed, they can throw the right hand, and I can slip and counter.
Yeah.
But that requires me to be very conscious and very aware and very calm, you know, not be in my own head. Oh my goodness, what if I get knocked out on TV? What if he takes me down? You know, what if I level change and he hits me in the face with a knee? And like all those kind of things going on in your mind is going to cut you off from going, these are the dangers here, right? Or like if I'm being squeezed in that way, what happens if I go that way? What options do they have?
Yeah.
Because it might just be an illusion that that's not safe. When in actuality, that person might not have a good left hook. And I might want them to throw the left hook so I can be ready for it to counter. So it's, you know, and that's just a tiny portion of the game, right? You extend that to the grappling ranges where I'm in side control and I can feel you trying to move. So I'm going to try and stop you moving, right? But I can't just stay here. I need you to move one way or the other. So you're either going to turn away from me or turn into me. So I'm going to let you turn into me and choke you. Or I'm going to let you turn away from me and take you back. But I'm controlling those decisions. And I don't want them to know I'm controlling those decisions.
So much to it. So much to it. You've articulated it so well as well.
Yeah.
So
I won that fight. Then I went on and won another one after that, which was the one in Nottingham against Amir Sadala. And in my head, I was right, 18 months, I'm going to have another run at this and see how it goes. Get back to the belt was the plan. And then I was locked in for a fight in April of 2013, and that was when I went to do tests. As you would normally in training camp, you do a bunch of different medical tests, but because it was California, they required an ECG, which I'd not had to do before. And when the doctor did the ECG, just as you know, as everybody on the card would have been, yep, everything's fine, you're cleared, you can fight. But they wouldn't clear me, and the doctor said, well, what's showing up is that you've got two electrical pathways, you've got two heartbeats, you've got your main heartbeat, but then there's also a group of cells somewhere else in your heart that's produced an electrical current that you don't want. And I can't clear you to fight because you might have a heart attack. He said, so the solution is that we can ablate it. They go in your carotid artery and in your femoral artery, and they like feed these things in through your arteries. And you know, they find the cells and they burn them, and that, you know, it should take care of it. But most of the time, this thing comes with side effects, symptoms. I was asymptomatic. I had no problems at all, and I'd been, you know, I'd probably had 250 fights at this point, and you know, I'd pushed myself, and I felt confident that my body was going to hold up. I didn't want anybody poking and burning bits or whatever, so I told them I didn't want to do it. They wouldn't clear me to fight, so I came back to the UK to see my doctor, and he said the same thing. I went to see a specialist, and they tested it, and they were like, "Don't touch it, it's fine." And then the more I looked into it, the more I had people telling me, "Yeah, I had this thing, didn't know I had it." You know, all of a sudden I'm sitting on the sofa and my heart rate goes up to 140 beats a minute. So they took me in, they've ablated it, and I was fine for a few weeks, and then it came back, and so like it looked like a can of worms that I didn't need to open. You know, so I was stubborn about it, but they wouldn't clear me to fight. I mean, the idea of becoming an analyst was not on my radar at all. I didn't really think about it. I just assumed I'd be a coach. But when the UFC gave me the opportunity, I then found myself with two fighters that are facing each other. And I'm like, well, I can now just apply exactly what I've done to both sides. So I'm going to watch Robbie Lawler, then I'm going to watch Roy McDonald, then I'm going to watch Robbie Lawler from Roy McDonald's perspective, then I'm going to watch Roy McDonald from Robbie Lawler's perspective. And then by the time I'd got cleared to fight, I was already well into a commentary career, and I was on the road almost all the time, you know. And I went from being, you know, at a show 3 times a year to being at a show 40 times a year, you know. And I felt like I was, especially with when the analysis shows started to get traction, I felt like I was serving the sport in a really positive way, you know. Like the breakdown shows and stuff, I had so many people come up to me and they're like, oh, I didn't even realize it was this complicated. I'm like, honestly, I'm scratching the surface. There's so much more, and there is so much more still to be shown. I think one other thing that really helped as well was at the same time as I was doing these analyses shows, we had the emergence of great fighters like Khabib and McGregor, you know, because like, and they had such different games, both of them, you know, like, and we've talked about the Greek hoplites and the way that they kind of eat the ground away, and that's what Khabib would do. He would trap you up against the fence, like there's all this space behind him, but you're in that little space up against the fence, and he's talking to you while he's beating you up, you know what I mean? It's a very oppressive style, whereas then McGregor's style is way more, I mean, I jokingly say it's way more like witchcraft. It's like magic what he does, because he's not in physical contact. People understand that Khabib grabs someone and controls them on the floor, but they don't understand the way that McGregor plays with the space between a fighter, because they don't understand how that can be manipulated. Like, a lot of people could look at the McGregor-Aldo fight and go, well, I could throw that punch, so therefore I could knock out Aldo. But what they don't understand is the hours and hours of drilling, of recognizing those triggers in Aldo's frame that was going to get McGregor to move back to throw that punch. And then on top of that, all of the work that McGregor had done in the build up to that, riding into the favelas on horseback, etc., etc., all of that foundation that he led to get Aldo into that state where he was like, got to get my hands on him, you know? And Aldo was always one of my favourite fighters. I loved him. It broke my heart to see him hit the canvas like that, but not for not wanting to see McGregor have success. It was rough to see him go out in such an easy way, because now people were going to discount him as being a great fighter, which was almost going to undermine how great McGregor's finish was, you know? And it's like people watch McGregor, it's like, well, he's just got a great left hand. But again, this is something I've broken this down before, and we can link it to a particular military strategy, right? A very, very famous battle, the Thermopylae 300, right? Where 300 fighters forced the Persian army into a choke point, right? People would not guess that McGregor does the same thing to his opponents, to put them on the end of that left hand. But he does. It's exactly the same situation. It's systematic. Like, this is why I have chalk on the floor in the gym, because we draw out the angles of the cage. That 135 degrees is deadly for McGregor. And unlike a boxer, most of the time a southpaw boxer will want you moving towards the left hand, but McGregor wants you moving away from it, because he slides you down a fence panel until you hit the next one, and the angle, that 135 degrees, brings you closer to his left hand. So it forces you into a choke point where you have to deal with the power. It's fascinating. And everything else about his game, all the big hands and the spinning kicks, all that is puffer fish. It's all bravado to get you squeezed into a choke point. It's beautiful work. It's really, really clever. And it's so easy to discount how clever it is, because no one's talking about it. And sometimes these fighters don't even know they're doing it. Sometimes like we talked about, they'll discover a small pocket, a small rhythm within the sport that works for them, right? And I can do this thing over and over again. I can walk you onto this head kick like Cro Cop. Everyone knew Cro Cop was going to kick him in the head, and he still kicked everybody in the head, right? Because he understands that little niche in the sport, and how to apply that one deadly weapon in 15 different ways. And just that one weapon with 5 different delivery systems is enough complexity to smash most people out of the water. So that's what I say to other fighters when I'm talking, when I'm coaching to them. Like, imagine if you can take McGregor's left hand and Cro Cop's left head kick. Like, straight away, you double the fighter, and they were formidable fighters, right? And then you go with your 3-beat GSP takedown, right? Double leg, run the pipe, knee tap. Super simple 3-hit combination for takedowns. Then you've got 3 takedowns and 10 ways of delivering 2 knockout strikes. And all of a sudden the complexity is massive. But people get stuck into these little pockets because they don't necessarily realize what they're doing sometimes. I don't think McGregor consciously realizes that he's putting people into a choke point. I just think he's realized over the hours and hours of sparring, when he gets people in that point, he can catch them with the left hand. You know, it's like that slip counter he used as well, same thing. It's reps and reps and reps. It's forcing people to throw their hands so he can feed off it. And there's so much left to be discovered still.
What now though? You know, you finished your physical athletic career.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know, to be honest. I don't know. I mean, my life does kind of move in cycles. And, you know, when one cycle comes to an end, it does start to feel like the new cycle's about to begin. And I remember feeling like that when my career with the UFC was coming to an end. I remember being out in Fight Island and saying to John Gooden, I think this is coming to an end. And it always stuck in my mind, that conversation, because I don't even know where it came from. It was like I said it and I heard myself say it, and I'm like, huh, interesting. And now I can hear my brain saying the same thing again. And there's a new phase coming, and there's something else that I need to do. And I do feel like part of it is the scribblings on the walls. I do feel like I need to get a lot of this down on paper and put it into a system that I feel like I can leave behind, that doesn't need me around to explain it. All these little spots here are all, it's all blood, all real blood. It's kind of funny because sometimes I'll be sitting here doing interviews and everyone's like, is that a real canvas behind you? Like, or someone will say, oh, your wall needs a clean. I'm like, it's like Fabricio Verdum's blood is what that is. But yeah, it's cool, isn't it? It's a bit of a different feature.
Marek Health made this documentary and this interview possible, and they're trying to help support the cause of inspiring change. If you're ready to take control of your health, go to marekhealth.com and use code Mulligan for 10% off. The link's down below.